All right, what's up, everybody? We are in the midst of an epidemic, or at least from what people say and what we hear, an epidemic. And the epidemic that we're talking about is hunter decline. So we've got some very special guests here today. We've got Emily from the Wisconsin DNR. We've got Micah, who works for Vortex, but has participated in a lot of DNR programs or classes that are designed to mitigate this decline and increase recruitment of hunters. Jimmy to my right, Eric Barber, very frequent guest.
To your right, kitty corner,
Kitty
across
corner,
the table.
across the way, if
Right.
you will. And so this is a pretty important topic. Emily, you're all pro at this, so we're probably going to lean on you quite a bit. But let's get started. Let's
have intros
fixing.
quick.
God, I just want to fix the problem.
I know, you're so
fast.
excited. Actually, I'm really glad you introed this one because I wouldn't have been able to intro it as well as you just did.
Yeah, that was well done.
As usual, alphabetical order. Emily, you want to kick off on introing yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
I'm Emily Ihel, and my title is R3 coordinator at the Wisconsin DNR. And so it's it's a very new position, and our whole R3 team is really new too, as people, learn more about this epidemic, which is a great word for it. But it's a really important topic, and so the DNR has addressed that, and our team has come together just in this last year. And so R3 stands for recruitment, retention, and reactivation, and I will be quizzing you all on that in separate rooms later on. But and that's of hunters, anglers, and shooting sports enthusiasts. So pretty all-encompassing, but those are kind of recreations or activities that have been really popular in the past. In the 1960s is when they peaked, and then so the DNR has been working with those demographics and people who are interested in those activities for a long time, and now they're declining since the 1980s, and our job is to kind of bring that back. And there's a whole list of implications. I don't know if we'll talk about that later, if I should rattle them off now, but I mean, we could talk for days about how important it is.
We're just all hanging off that cliff. Go for it. Rattle some off.
Well, so, I mean, I could give a history lesson, or I could give the immediate, problem. How much time should I spend on it?
How much time you got, buddy? I'd say lay it on us.
Yeah, lay it on.
Okay. Well, I mean, to me, so I didn't grow up as a hunter, and I grew up in a suburb of Chicago. Don't kill me, but
That's all right. That's all right.
But hunting wasn't really in the culture there, and so I knew one or two people who hunted, but other than that, I honestly didn't have a very good opinion of hunters, just because I didn't really know any. I didn't know what hunting was like, and you see all the the media and stuff like that, and it just wasn't very positive for me. But so I lost my train of thought actually, but so
what changed?
The epidemic.
So what changed that though? Like, kind of what changed your opinion about hunters and hunting?
Well, so I started to meet some. I branched out and I went to Wisconsin for school, and hunting is such a big part of the culture here in Wisconsin that I remember sitting in my chemistry class, and on the Friday before the 9-day gun season, everybody was gone, and the professor made some comments about like, gosh, like here we are in Wisconsin, nobody's at class because deer hunting, and I was like, oh, why would you do that? But I mean, literally, it was just like an inundation. Like the more the more time I spent in Wisconsin, the more hunters I got to know, and I mean, everybody's so great. And my husband played a big role in this. So I met my husband my senior year of college, and he's always been hunting since he was a kid, and just the number of things that we had to connect on was amazing. So I studied conservation in school, and so I was learning how to ID all these plant species and animal species, and thinking about ecological communities. And it was amazing because he was already so familiar with that, even though he's an engineer. Like, he spends his time in a lab crushing cement blocks and things like that. And so I just really connected with him so easily. And I've seen a lot of, the more hunters I meet, it seems like so many of them just have that in them and they value that. And it became just a natural fit for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, he brought me to a Learn to Hunt program that he was volunteering for.
Nice.
And it was a turkey one in the spring, and it was actually one of the first adult programs. So Micah was coming into the program shortly after that. But they really focused on just people who were not in that culture growing up. It was, people who were studying wildlife ecology and conservation and agroecology and all these people who wanted to be connected with the land, but they just didn't have that experience. And I think so many of them they got it right away, which was really interesting. But so I liked turkey hunting. It was great. I saw turkeys fly down from the roost, and I was closer to a deer than I've ever been before, and I slept in the blind, and it was great. And
Nice.
So I just kept going. I participated in a deer Learn to Hunt, and I ate venison, which is amazing. A lot of people think it tastes terrible, but it really doesn't. It's wonderful. It's better than beef, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But and I think using the animal was something that was really important to me, and I think that's something that a lot of hunters don't convey enough. Like, it's so natural to hunters that they eat the animal or they use it in some way, but I think that's just, I think people who don't grow up in a hunting culture or hunting family, they hear people say it and they're like, yeah, but you don't really like it, or venison's not really good.
Yeah.
You just do it to force it down, and you wouldn't hunt unless you just like to kill things. So I think that's definitely one thing that people could do more.
Isn't there even a statistic out there where, there's, of the non-hunting population, like 60% or like the vast majority are in favor of hunting for food?
Yes.
But,
Yep.
and what is that stat? Is it like six? Like, I thought it was a majority.
It is a majority. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it was way higher than I thought it was
And
when
then
I
on
first saw that.
On the backside of that same population, when asked about like trophy hunting, they're like very against that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, to your point about how hunters portray what they do, like, a lot of times someone might be somebody who's, going out there and they're trying to shoot a specific class of animal, which there's nothing wrong with that, and then they post those photos, and that's what gets publicized, and they don't even take into consideration, well, now I need to do something that shows about what else I'm doing here.
Well, and I think that's a common misconception. Like, people say, they hear the word trophy hunting or trophy hunter, which actually I don't even like that word. But I think, like you said, trophy hunting and hunting for food are oftentimes, they're one and the same. It's the same thing. It's just how you're phrasing it or how you're portraying it. And I think, to your point, a lot of times what we can do a better of, like, as hunters, I always say this, we do know the rest of the story, right? Like, we know the A to Z process of, in general, like what it took to harvest that animal or kill that animal, however you want to phrase that. That's another thing. Actually, I don't shy away from the word kill. I mean, honestly, that is
That's
what's
what
happening.
You're doing,
But yeah, anyway, speaking of losing your train of thought, but we don't tell, like, we know the rest of the story, and sometimes you forget to tell that. So from the outside in, that can look, unappealing.
I think one of the things that happens too is like, what do you like focus on or glorify? And when I did the Learn to Hunt Deer thing, they talked about this, and like the loudest part of the hunting community to a lot of people are those people that have bumper stickers that say, like, if it's brown, it's down, if it flies, it dies, if it hops, it drops, and like all
Words to live by,
right? Like, but all they see is like that
plug. Thanks a lot, Eric.
But all they see is like that culture of the kill, right? And like that's like sometimes the loudest part, and that's all they see. They don't see the part about harvesting and eating the food and all that good stuff.
This is Micah, by the way.
The voice you're hearing, is Micah. We should let him introduce himself real quick too, because we're all very amped up and ready to dive in, which is excellent. But Micah, real quick, give the listeners here an idea of who you are, what you do.
My name is Micah Rieker. I am the copywriter here at Vortex. So I grew up in a house where my dad hunted. Wasn't really like brought into that. It was like he'd go to deer camp. He'd go and get some pheasant, some grouse every now and then. I have memories of going out in the backyard and he'd be cleaning a grouse, and just to kind of wig me out, he'd like pop the heart in his mouth, eat the heart.
Oh my gosh.
I never.
Are you sure he was doing that for real? Like, he wasn't like magic tricking that thing?
It was great. I mean, not great. It freaked me out, but it was something I was always kind of interested or curious about, but I only came to it because like I started reading some Michael Pollan stuff and really getting down on kind of factory farming, the way we treated animals. And so I was like, I'm going to be a vegetarian or a pescatarian or whatever, where you only eat what you catch. And I did that for a year, and it was horrible. And so that was like, it's time to take up hunting, because I really wanted to be a part of like to me, I was interested in it because of like the moral side of things. I wanted to be responsible for killing an animal if I was going to choose to eat animals. And so that's kind of how I came into the Learn to Hunt Deer. And what I didn't expect, and what I think a lot of people don't expect, is how enjoyable hunting actually is. I mean, once I got over killing the animal, which is never fun for me to like the killing part of it, but the eating part of it is amazing. Mm-hmm. But the experience of hunting is so much fun. And so then I started just jumping into every Learn to Hunt program I had time for.
Mike has been awesome.
Yeah,
very familiar face.
When you say like every Learn to Hunt program you had time for, that was a lot. Because I remember when we were talking with you and you first started here, you mentioned, a lot of people always ask somebody when they first start here, it's kind of like, oh, do you hunt? And you said, yeah, a little bit. You started relatively recently. Mm-hmm. And when we started asking you what you hunt, you were like, well, I've done pretty much every Learn to Hunt program in Wisconsin. You've gone all over the state. You've hunted things that fly, things that run on the ground, things that you've fished, I think, too, right?
Yeah, I definitely grew up fishing. That was something where I didn't need too much help with. But as far as Learn to Hunt, I've done deer, turkey, ducks. And then my favorite, the one that's kind of like had a really big effect on me, was the Learn to Hunt with dogs, which was absolutely one of the most fun experiences I've had. I got to see the dogs work in the field, got to actually go on a pheasant hunt with them, which was just, it kind of opened my eyes to a whole different way of hunting that I'm really looking forward to kind of joining pretty soon.
That's super cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And talk about one where people who haven't engaged in that prior to sort of hearing about it or speaking on it, mm-hmm. that they can misconstrue or get the wrong idea for, mm-hmm. In many places, certain avenues or certain uses with dogs is not legal, or, many people look down on it, speak against it, say it's unfair. And I'm sure that was probably, like you said, it was a pretty eye-opening experience for you. What was the biggest thing for you when you did Learn to Hunt with dogs? Like, actually, I'm curious, how come you even chose to do it?
The Learn to Hunt with dogs?
Yeah.
I came at it that, again, from kind of a weird angle, and it was much more of like a conservation almost, where there's this statistic that's out there, and of course it's a statistic that I can't remember, but your chances of recovering game with a dog, not even a well-trained dog, not even like a finished dog, but just a dog, it goes up like, it's like some massive number, like over 50%. And in fact, when we were out there, I think it was actually your dog. I can't remember, but I wingtipped a pheasant. Like, it was a shot, it was kind of far away. It's probably like the 5th or 6th time I've ever shot at a pheasant. And I can remember I actually like saw the feather kind of go, and the bird just sort of tilted in its flight, and it landed maybe 75 yards away and ran into this clump of just thickness, like stuff that I probably couldn't have made it into. And I felt immediately horrible. I was like, that was a stupid shot. Why did I do that? And they sent the dog in, and like 5 minutes later it comes running up with basically an alive bird. But it had been wingtipped. It had been like wounded to the point that it probably wouldn't have, it would have been coyote food or something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That dog comes running back with that bird, and it was like, oh my gosh, that wasn't even a solid shot, and I'm going to get this bird, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Doesn't wind up being wasted, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool thing to point out too, is like, number one, like, you were able to recover that bird. Awesome, right? And the use of a dog aided greatly in that. Like, probably, like you said, wouldn't have happened had you not had a dog. But then it's also good to point out, I feel like, to maybe first-time hunters or new hunters or people who are thinking about hunting, that I would say hunting's not perfect, right? And it's not going to go right every time.
No. Yeah.
And even if it was maybe maybe it was even a close, well, maybe it seemed like, oh, that's a gimme shot, right? Those don't always go perfect too.
Yeah,
so it's like,
thing.
and I think that's life. That's anything in life. So it's like, you want to I guess, whatever, do as good a job as possible, but
Yeah.
also you can't beat yourself up
Yeah.
at the same time if something doesn't go absolutely right.
And even to take that one step further, like we talked about how, the hunting population has different perceptions. Talk about an awesome way to get people involved with hunting, whether or not they're whatever they feel about the act of hunting or the act of shooting an animal. People like spending time with dogs,
Oh,
know?
There's
So
definitely statistics about that. Just
Yeah.
like people get into hunting. So I think it was from the Rough Grouse Society, actually. They surveyed their members, and it was like everybody over age 60 shot their first grouse without a dog, and everybody under that age, or the majority obviously, had shot their first grouse with a dog. And I just think that
No
people
kidding.
Yeah,
love,
that is super cool.
That's
It's
interesting.
a huge hook, and I think
Yeah.
having the dog was one of the main reasons that I kept hunting. Like, I liked the experience, but I had always wanted a dog, and I love seeing working dogs.
Yeah.
Just they're so talented and so beautiful and so happy doing it. And I think that I kept hunting for her for sure.
Your dog
Yeah.
is a Jedi too. Like it's unbelievable. It heals. It follows right next to her everywhere she goes. It's incredible.
That is something you hear a lot from people who hunt with dogs or that I've noticed. Sometimes people peg it as like a lazy man or woman's way of hunting, because it's like, you just go out and the dogs do all the work. Like you're sitting back in your fold up chair with a beer and the dogs.
Right.
And it's like,
Bring them this way, Sam.
like you just go out and it's basically laid out for you. But that's not the case. I mean, the amount of work that you have to put into the dogs, like, if your dog's like a Jedi, so to speak, you've had to put in a ton of work to make it that way.
Yeah.
And you hear a lot of the people that hunt with dogs, and the actual hunt and then the actual act of going out and killing is almost second
Yeah.
to the whole experience of training the dog, getting the dog ready, actually having it out there, watching it work, like seeing how you have broken the barrier between species to make another
Exactly.
species,
It's amazing.
and you become a better unit together than you would be alone or it would be alone. Like you're tag teaming.
Yeah.
That's just poetry in my mind.
Yeah.
And people,
Yeah.
people don't do that.
Down.
People don't do that with cats. People don't do that. Well, I don't know. Maybe some indigenous somewhere does it with cats, but
People don't do it great with other people.
I was just going to bring that up.
people, they don't do it with rodents. Some people do it with falcons, which I'm extraordinarily
Okay.
interested in. But there's something about like dogs. Humans have been hunting with dogs for bazillions of years or whatever.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I mean, like
not
you
even
said, you're
about
definitely...
the kill with that. People would rather watch the dog work, and then that is icing on the cake.
put the work into making sure the dog does what they. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I think it's icing on the cake, and I think it I haven't hunted over dogs enough, but like you see, like, taking of that animal is like, it's just like you said, it's the icing on the cake, but it also completes the experience, and you see all your work, and I guess that's any hunt, but you see all your work come to fruition in that single moment.
Just like you said, it's similarly to somebody who goes out long range hunting, gets bagged on a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the guys who go out and do long range shooting out west, they shoot and kill a deer that's 900 yards away, and immediately everybody's on their keyboards. That's too far. You can't shoot it. Well, it's like, well, you can't. But little did you know, this dude's been reloading his own ammunition, finding the node, shooting, practicing, hitting, going sub MOA at, whatever. And just so that all culminates up to that one point that you saw on YouTube and freaked out about because you thought he just kind of like winged it and said, Jerry, there's one, hop out of the UTV and sling it.
Yeah, it's
That
so
would be
much
Rick.
preparation, and I think the preparation, honestly, and Micah, maybe you can weigh into this, is like a lot of that is what is gratifying to me about hunting, and I think a lot of the people who are participating in these learn to hunt programs, hunt for food programs, like they don't want it to be easy. They want to put in the work, like Micah said. They don't want to see this is such a cliche thing almost, but a hunk of beef on a styrofoam tray wrapped in plastic, like it's just not very gratifying anymore. And but yeah, I was gonna say about the dog, I spent like 2 years 4 days a week just working with her so consistently, and one of my favorite things really is just watching her in the grouse woods. She's really cautious on grouse, and it's like artwork in motion, how
Yeah.
she just works them, and she doesn't push them, but she's always tracking them, and she's so intense. It's just something, it's just one small example of something that you see when you hunt that you don't see in other situations. And definitely think people are looking for that.
Talk about like a closer connection too with your dog. Some
Right.
people, they have a dog and it's like, yeah, I leave the dog at home in the crate while I'm at work.
Yeah.
And then I come back, the dog comes out, it's all anxious because it's been cooped up all day. So it sprints around the house, annoys the heck out of me, bites the kid, eats the thing off the counter, tears my shoe apart.
Pukes
then
on the floor.
Pukes on the floor. Then I put it back up at night, and then it sleeps overnight, and the whole process starts over again. But dang, I love that dog. And it's kind of like, okay, well, then this other person with a dog, they're out there, they're taking the dog everywhere with them, they're working with it constantly. The dog's getting enjoyment out of being worked, getting energy out, running around. And,
I
it's
think
just you wind up with a happier dog, you wind up with a happier person, better relationship with the dog.
Well, I think, of course, this is turning into the Vortex, dog podcast.
Well,
right
there's
now.
other stuff we'll get into here too.
But both you guys brought up one thing, and I think sometimes this is like a misconception, maybe with the greater public at times. But some of these breeds that are sporting dogs, they are at their happiest when they're engaging in these activities. Like, they truly love it. Like, if you've seen a dog in the early AM and it sees its owner put the shotgun by the door,
Boom.
that dog is like as excited as you can be. And you talked about a deeper connection. Rarely have I seen a deeper connection between an owner and their dog when it's a sporting dog.
Yep, it's true.
All right.
All right, we talked about dogs a lot. Micah, what kind of dog? You already have a dog, and it's a pretty cool dog.
He's an amazing dog.
He's a pretty sweet dog.
He has all kinds of hunt in him, but he's an older boy, and he's not gonna be the kind of dog I want to take after birds or anything like that. He caught a deer while I was away on vacation.
My God.
He caught a deer?
Yeah, it was a fawn. But I mean,
What kind of dog is it?
you've seen Ozzy. He's like a husky shepherd.
Okay.
Yeah, and
He is.
he had the thing by the neck. My poor mother-in-law had to yank him off at this deer.
By husky, Micah meant wolf shepherd.
Yes.
Dire wolf.
Illegal to hunt deer with dogs, but you're right,
Yes.
he has hunted him.
Idiot
That's
dog.
good.
I found him in northern Wisconsin and just put him in my truck. Micah, that's a wolf.
Yeah, but I'm really looking for kind of a smaller dog. So English Cocker or Brittany are the two ways. I want to hunt over a Flushing dog before I kind of commit, but hunting over the pointing dogs was so much fun.
Cool.
And that was one of the things you guys were talking about, the connection between the hunter and the dog. I cracked up when we were out because guys would miss on shots who own these dogs, and all they could talk about is like, oh, he's looking at me, he's ashamed, or like, oh, you know what I mean? The dog's blaming them
my
for
job,
missing.
you screwed
Yeah,
up.
exactly.
You two-legged
Thanks a lot.
weirdo.
They do give you like a what the hell look.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Send it.
I'm going to tell you a question. Speaking of hunter decline, so like what are you guys... I'm switching gears here.
Yep.
Sorry.
Well done.
There's a lot of dog owners out there like,
Very
oh,
smooth.
cripes. What are you guys seeing as far as like hunter decline? Like who's falling off right now?
Yeah, so a lot of it, so this is very demographical information, but just looking at, I mentioned that the highest number of hunters in the U.S., both percentage-wise, but also flat-out numbers-wise, was during the baby boom generation. And so obviously just population skyrocketed. And so at that time, I don't know what it was. It was very generational. I don't know if it was like Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone, kind of just like love seeing that, want to be a part of it, have the raccoon skin cap or whatever. But hunting was just at its highest at that point. And so now, as we're, as a country and society moving along, those people are aging, and that's such a common topic nowadays. But they're kind of aging out, and just as is natural. So a lot of the people who hunted at that time are just, hanging up their boots and deciding that now is a good time to quit. And so we're losing a lot of hunters that way. But also, we've run the models, and the statistics show that it's not just that baby boomers are aging out of the hunter population. It's also that, younger folks, people in Generation X, and they're just not you know, they might have hunted when they were kids and they just never come back to it. But it's really, you know, this group of men who are between age 25 and 45 who are not showing up anymore, and it's like compounded because those are the people who would be teaching their kids to hunt, and so we're really going to be seeing a drop off, you know, as we get older. So if you're out there, it's really important that you take your kids hunting.
Right.
But interestingly enough, I mean, the only demographic of hunters that's actually on the rise is women. So, I mean, it's just been climbing since the turn of the century. So I think at the turn of the century it was maybe like 2%, and now it's at 11%.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so, you know, the researchers say that women are never going to make up for the loss in the number of male hunters that we have. But it's just interesting, you know, how that population is changing and what are we going to see in a few years or 10 years or 20 years. And, you know, in my opinion, being a woman, I think it's really important to facilitate women who are interested in hunting because, you know, you guys can probably attest that it's more fun to go hunting with a friend or a buddy or, you know, a family member than it is to go all by yourself. And sometimes it's nice to go by yourself, but the people who keep you going are if you go with somebody or somebody asks you. And if you have multiple people hunting in a family, I just think that can only serve us best.
Yeah. So with all that stuff in mind, like we've talked a little bit about like these learn to hunt programs and stuff like that, but could you give us like a high level overview of what those programs are and then how you guys are filling those classes, you know, and even more so than that, how are you filling those with the people that you think are the best fit for like rebuilding up that hunting population?
Definitely. So I can give you kind of the, you know, how Learn to Hunt started and then how it's evolved into Hunt for Food and some of the programs that we're doing now. So it was in the 1990s that people first started noticing this trend of declining hunters. And so it was actually a researcher at UW-Madison named Tom Heberlein. He published the first paper that I'm aware of about just saying, hey, like, look at this, you know, a lot's riding on, you know, these people who are declining, and based on his models, it's not going to go back up. So, I mean, the DNR responded really fast. I don't know if it was kind of, you know, a joint effort or if they just, you know, were hearing about that and said, okay, we need to do something. But so 1996 is when the Learn to Hunt program started. And it was really not a very well known about program. I think the chief warden, Randy Stark, said it was like the DNR's best kept secret or something like that. And but the Learn to Hunt program, it put in place license waivers or legal waivers anyway. So the idea was that, you know, people start learning to hunt as kids. So we need to get more kids into this population. And so and there was kind of some assumptions that were made about why kids weren't hunting anymore. And some of those were like, well, you know, they're not having a good enough opportunity during the regular seasons. So they waived the season dates so you can conduct a Learn to Hunt program outside the regular season. They waived licenses, bag limits, except for waterfowl, which is federally designated. But so in Wisconsin, it's so interesting that so many states they don't have legal waivers like that even now. So some states are, you know, following that trend and latching on. But you know, so this infrastructure was put into place, and not too many people were participating. And finally, you know, the program switched from the Division of Wildlife up into the Bureau of Law Enforcement because they had some, you know, opportunity to grow the program. And finally, they got some extra funding kicked in and, you know, hired an actual staff person to work on this program. And they were like, wow, you know, 96% of the participants in the Learn to Hunt program are going on to buy licenses. That's amazing. Like,
that is
really
awesome.
Great success rates. And they started diving into it a little bit more and saying, well, who are these participants and where are they coming from and what they what they were finding was that a lot of the participants were kids who were actually coming from hunting families themselves. And I forgot to mention that the Learn to Hunt program also waives the need for hunter education before going on an actual hunt. And so a lot of the participants were coming straight out of hunter education classes, which is great. Like, it's a super high quality first hunt experience, very safe, you're one-on-one mentor. But it wasn't really, the number of hunters was just still declining.
Yeah, we were getting those
Right.
people already.
Exactly.
essentially.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep. So it's a great program. Like, people love it. Hunters and people in the community, even if they don't hunt, they love volunteering for these programs, which is so nice to see everybody coming together as a group, and it's so friendly. And lots of people, do fish fries, and then they get up early to go hunt, and it's so fun to be there. And
Fish
everybody always
fries
has a
for
good time.
Those outside of Wisconsin is a thing we do on Friday nights. You got to be there. I don't know how to explain it.
We were talking
it's a
about
Friday night thing.
It's a Wisconsin Friday night thing. As a transplant, it was completely foreign to me. I absolutely love it now. It's almost like this completely arbitrary thing to look forward to all week.
Exactly.
If you come to Wisconsin, never pass up the opportunity for fish fry. If you're
On Friday.
Yep.
Yeah. But so anyway, super fun program, but just realizing that, this isn't really making a dent in the trend that we're seeing. And so some of the things that we started doing after that was saying, like, okay, what is our goal? We want to increase the number of hunters or slow the decline down. And so what do we need to do to meet that goal? And so you really had to start thinking outside the box a little bit more. So where do you find people who didn't grow up in hunting families or who don't have a network? And I think, kids are great to bring into that, but it's very, if you think about the first time you went hunting, you were probably little, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, very small. And you probably didn't even have a license, but you were going with your dad over and over and over again every year until you could buy a license and hunt. And then he was probably still with you for so many years, and before you ever went all by yourself. And so that's just a lot of, if a kid doesn't have a mentor like that in their family who can really be so close to them, it's really hard to teach a kid from a non-hunting family to hunt, because you have to find a relationship that's just really tight and close and trusting, and you have to have time for that. And so kids can't make decisions by themselves, really. They can't buy their own stuff, they can't drive themselves anywhere, they can't even really decide what to do with their own time, so you really have to rely on their parents. So we started looking into, who else can we find? And so we started looking at adults who didn't come from hunting families, but who were interested in it. And so a lot of those people are actually from the campus community at UW-Madison. So I studied conservation biology. Micah, what did you study at Madison?
No, I got roped in completely by chance. Somebody just said, "Hey, this is happening."
But but probably through the campus
You bucked
community
the trend,
in some way.
Micah. That's right.
I know.
For the
I'm
sake
the
of the
outlier.
example,
He's an
just
individual.
pretend
Just say
like,
yes.
But,
I was studying.
I mentioned before that so many of these people who want to learn how to be connected with the land, it was just a ringer. Like, it was so easy to get them interested in this program. And what they really, wanted to learn about was, how can I do the work? How can I become more connected to my food? How can I be involved in this entire process instead of having to buy that hunk of beef on a styrofoam tray? And so that's worked really well for us. And, for our deer program, which I'd say is definitely the most popular program, I'm always turning people away. Like, we advertise it through the environmental studies student list. And we just don't have enough mentors to be one-on-one with these people, and we don't often have enough land to spread people out enough. But everybody wants to learn how to deer hunt. And you think about it, it's the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak, if you're looking for food especially. So,
Right.
In your opinion, is that deer hunting, is that a great place to start?
I was interested in that, and I think it is, and I think it is because of the audience we're looking at, which is adults. A lot of them are being transplanted into Wisconsin. They're seeing this culture, and they want to be a part of that, and I think that's great. And so, and if you are in it for food, I mean, one shot and you've got 50 pounds or more.
Right.
But a lot of people say, well, we should really be doing more small game classes, and I do tend to agree with that. I went squirrel hunting a lot before I ever shot a deer. Just thinking about a lot of people have personal opinions. Like a lot of people feel more comfortable shooting a bird rather than a mammal and things like that.
Less personal.
Right, exactly. I tend to have a harder time shooting
less
birds
close
than deer.
to me.
Right.
I guess.
Less big brown eyes and eyelashes.
Yep. Humanizing wildlife. Anyways, we totally digress.
I know. But I guess for like the purpose of teaching people to hunt independently, and especially, these people who are, from basically they're in an urban area, Madison, Wisconsin. A lot of it is about access.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find access for deer in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And so, you can hunt public land, but it's either really crowded or you need to do a hell of a lot of work. Or, you can go after other species that also provide meat. So bunnies, we've been doing bunny programs. We've been doing bird programs like pheasants that are stocked around the southern part of the state. I would love to do a grouse program. We haven't been
That'd be awesome.
quite able to do
Yeah.
that yet. There's a couple people in the state who have launched grouse programs, and people really like it. But just kind of looking for that local, how can you be successful locally?
Yeah.
And it's got to be accessible enough where it doesn't take a weekend or a week to be able to go on a trip or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think that's such a good point to like bring to light, because you talked about like the generational gap. Like in the 1960s, there were way more people living in rural areas than there are today. We are literally living on top of one another today. Apartments, stuff like that downtown. Now you're taking what your population used to be more distributed in these rural areas. People could literally go in their backyard and shoot a deer, shoot a rabbit for food. We talked about this just the other day when we brought up the video games thing. How people got introduced to guns, in the 1960s was their dad came home from work, gave them the .22, they went in the backyard and shot it.
Yep.
You do that in downtown Madison, and I'll see you in the Clink someday.
You plan on going?
I guess that did just literally imply that.
Yeah.
But even when we talk to...
Depends. Did you pay for that Reese's?
I did. I did pay for it.
Then
But where I'm going with that...
Even when we talk to... sorry to interrupt, Eric, but Doug, I'm blanking right now, who we went squirrel hunting with.
Durin.
Yeah.
Oh.
Even back then, even in Madison proper, he actually used to walk along the railway with his .22. So it's like even just the city has changed a little bit.
Yeah.
But continue.
But... Pat Durkin, that's what
I was
you're
gonna say
talking
Pat.
about.
Doug.
Yeah.
I
was
get him,
thinking
yeah,
Doug
Pat
and...
Durkin. It's the Durkin and the Durin that I always get mixed up.
Yeah. Anyways, so like now access is such a big issue, and that's what these Learn to Hunt programs really can button up for you. Like they'll take care of that access, and they'll give you that opportunity, whether that's for you name the species, it's there, and then. So after the hunt, how does that work with like the food aspect of it? Because a lot of these
Sure.
people, anyone can pull the trigger on something with the right instruction, but then it turns into, oh crap, what now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of the participants are looking for. I don't know if you can speak to that, Micah.
Yeah, you can take it as far as you want in the program, which is really neat. They offer a special, like at least when I was taking the deer class, there's a special kind of like side class where you could go and actually watch a deer get butchered, starting from the hide and going down. I wasn't able to do that. My mentor helped me take the deer to a processor, kind of walk me through what, like if you have this much steak, you can have this much, you can have this made into sauce, like going through how a deer gets broken down and all that. But it's really, you can take it as far as you want. There's people who I think from the Learn to Hunt class, who took the deer back in the garage and broke it down. Like
That's
they tried to do it themselves, yeah.
That's
yeah,
cool.
so the Hunt for Food class, which evolved from Learn to Hunt. So the Learn to Hunt program is typically like a weekend-long program. So you do your classroom session on Friday, and then you hunt Saturday, Sunday. So the Hunt for Food program, like the people who are getting, they just want a lot more information. They don't want to just pull the trigger. They want to know, like,
I'm
you
sure.
know, are these people that I feel comfortable with? So we spend a whole session just as a getting to know you. Why are you here? Like, what are your values? Why do you want to hunt? And I think
that was huge for me. That
yeah,
helped a ton.
I think that's one of the most important parts of the class for people. But then, you know, once you've established that rapport, you feel comfortable going hunting with these people, thinking about taking a life. You know, it's important to have people to talk about that with. So the next classroom, we usually go to a shooting range. So a lot of the people in the classes have never shot a gun before.
Yeah,
so
even at 22. Like
Yeah.
some people, the first gun they ever shot was like a rifle, like a hunting rifle.
Yep.
Not even a BB gun. They'd never touched a gun before.
0 to 60.
Yeah.
Yeah.
0 to 308. Anyways.
Well put.
So yeah, we typically start them off on 22s and then work up to the deer hunting calibers, and we go through some different hunting situations. So like sitting in a chair, sitting, you know, on, you know, kneeling or something like that in the prone position, and just kind of going through, all right, a deer's going to walk up, you're going to see it, it'll probably stop, but you know, you've got time, but it's not going to stay there forever. So, you know, yep, exactly. And I think that's really valuable for people too. And then the next class is the butchering class. So we actually take a deer, hang it up in the Fur Resources Training Center, I think is the official name. But yeah, and we've got great mentors and instructors who they can just, you know, butcher a deer like that.
Yeah.
And so we literally take the skin off, break it all down, and we start giving knives out to people and saying, here, all right, you do this, because you know, it's one thing to watch that,
Right.
and I think butchering is one of the most overwhelming
Totally.
things for people.
I mean, we did a butchering thing this year, like, you know, processing your deer after you brought it in and, you know, broken down. And literally, like, we, you know, between the people that were at the table, we had, like, literally decades of hunting experience.
Yeah.
And we're still like, okay, like, what cut of meat is this again? So it is, you know, to that point, it's very intimidating and it's a big learning curve.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't
Well,
know
and
why I thought, too, like, when I break down a deer, I guess I shouldn't even say I don't know why, because I do know why. When I break down a deer, not nearly as, I don't want to say grossed out, because I don't want to sound like, you know, I just get all, like, cringy around beef.
Right.
But when I'm grabbing, like, the pack of beef or a steak out of the styrofoam thing that's wrapped in plastic, I always pick it up and I'm working with it, or I just always feel a little bit weird. It's definitely like immediately go to wash the hands as soon as possible after touching that. But when we were working on breaking down a deer,
Yeah. I know where this came from.
you'd be ripping it apart, you'd be cutting it into different things, and you put that piece over there, you grab your knife, you're going all around. At no point was I thinking, ugh, you know, like, I gotta wash my hands soon. You know, at no point. But it's much cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd say for me, it was almost even the opposite. Like, so I grew up in a hunting family, but for my first few years that we went deer, we're predominantly deer hunting, you know, some grouse hunting, and, you know, other things. But, I mean, predominantly deer hunting. But the first years I went, like, we never got a deer. We're hunting blacktails in Western Washington, which isn't, like, a super crazy high success rate, I don't think, compared to, like, you know, maybe around here. And then also, you know, I was kids. We were kids with my dad, so I don't think we were really
No concept of sound.
No concept of sound. Yeah, you know, paying attention. Like, so I'm not sure we were helping the deer hunting situation, but I do remember when we finally got one, you know, so that was like something that was kind of foreign to me, right? And so, like, I was used to having, you know, a steak wrapped in cellophane, and all of a sudden it became very, very, very real, which was, like, it wasn't bad, but it was also, like, I mean, I guess that was probably the first time, like, I truly realized, even though I knew, but, like, whoa, that's where meat comes from.
Yep.
You know, and it was like startling, I'd say, but also like enlightening and exciting at the same time.
I no longer walk through the butcher's section in the grocery store and think, oh, it all looks so good. I walk through and I'm kind of thinking, crap, I got to get something out of here because my freezer's empty.
But yeah. So conversely, like nowadays, like Eric and I or whatever, we could go hunt deer, get it broke down, and 5 minutes later, if somebody's got a fry pan or a fire,
it's going on there.
Like, so it's just interesting. So I guess that's like, that was my natural progression. I could see like somebody who, you know, not hunted their whole life, like it's okay to, I guess, be scared a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
The food element has really come on scene a lot lately, and I think it's because a lot of people have realized what you were just describing earlier, that you guys are finding that hunter decline is a real thing, and in order to get new people into the hobby, the sport, the lifestyle, it's not so much just relying on dad to take out the kids hunting. You're kind of relying on finding new avenues to get people into it, and a lot of those might be people that are real interested in the environment and all those kinds of things. And without being too just like throwing a blanket over everything or being too general, I think that those kinds of folks, sort of the quote hippies, that I think a lot of people say, food, yeah, they get a bad rap. They get a bad rap in the hunting and the shooting sports and culture sometimes because they've started out as sort of like a hippie who didn't previously agree with them or in what they did. And now all of a sudden they see them hunting, they see them talking about firearms, and you've seen people saying, "Oh, they're trying to infiltrate the hunting market and collapse us from the inside out," or whatever. And I've found that kind of baffling because
I think it's a boogeyman mentality.
It is. It's very boogeyman in many ways, and a lot of times it's the same people who look around. They're like. They say to themselves, "Look at all these city slickers around here. None of these people ever had dirt under their fingernails or wore boots or none of these people. They're all wearing jeans. They never got dirt on them." And you think to yourself, "Okay, well now they're hunting,
right?"
But now those people turn into, "Oh, well they're just a bunch of hippies and they all they don't actually and they don't." Just because they only own one gun, they must not like guns, or they don't own an AR-15, they only own a bolt-action hunting rifle, so they're anti-AR-15. They want to take away our modern sporting or whatever, and semi-automatics, and who knows what. All of a sudden, all these theories and just crazy stuff comes out.
I think the person that gets lumped into that, and which is a real, very legit problem. I mean, you go on any forum or any social media platform, and you lose faith in humanity sometimes when you do start really getting into that. But I think what a lot of that crowd that you just kind of described, they're at this level, whatever that they're at. There's stages of anything, stages of being a hunter, and they're at this stage where they want to see, and they're surrounding themselves by only their group of people, and they put on the blinders, and they forget where they started, And now today, where that person started maybe 30 years ago isn't the same as where people are starting right now. And the fact of the matter is, if we want to continue having these things that we have, we need to start being more accepting of these different entry points and different values for getting started, you know?
Well, and I think you're talking about differences, right? And instead of looking at how we're different and saying we're different this way, so I don't like you. It's well, let's find the common ground and start there.
Yeah. I think that with the Learn to Hunt thing, that was one of the things that I was really impressed with is all the mentors who volunteer from that are coming from very different places themselves. But something they all have in common is the passion for hunting. But it was really cool for me because they, one guy, I did Learn to Hunt turkey. There's one guy who was just like you would expect, people in their mind, he's a stereotypical hunter. And I know somebody who got paired with him, and they were kind of "Oh God, he's gonna be having a whole bunch of chew in the blind and all this, out there." But they had the best experience, and these people saw eye to eye. He taught them everything he knew about turkey hunting. They got a turkey, set him up for success, and all that. But it really brings you together with people where you might otherwise be looking at them kind of out of the side of your eye a little bit, I don't know about you, that kind of thing.
Well. Not all hunters have to look the same.
Right. Exactly.
Which I think a lot of times people get the idea that all hunters have to look the same.
Right.
You can be... Some people have noticed on the podcast thus far when they watch on video, they notice that I'm wearing sandals because it's summer out. and it's not necessarily by choice. I also have to wear sandals, long story.
Really?
But I can wear sandals and hunt. I'm not going to hunt in my sandals. But some sandal
unless we're in Hawaii, some sandal wearing city slicker can
go hunting.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is a lot of people think, well, if you don't, I don't know what. If you
No,
don't look
it's
just like
it's
me,
like-
then I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
like you.
It's
or
just
you can't.
a good reminder without like getting preachy on a high horse, but
Yeah.
don't judge a book by its cover. And some dude in a slick puffy jacket might be the coolest hunter that you ever hunted with, and some dude with a dip in his mouth that's just an old farmhand might be the coolest dude you ever
Yeah.
hunted with, or female, woman, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the great
the,
thing about that too
go
is
ahead.
like I'm sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay.
But I love it because all those people have such like different experience, like sets. Like some of them have only ever hunted public land.
Yep.
Like they don't have relatives or anything like that. So they can give you insight into how to hunt really heavily trafficked land. And some guys have hunted up north, down out, big game hunting, you name it. And so with everybody in the Learn to Hunt program, I got a different taste of what hunting could be and different tips for how to hunt different areas. And it was coming from people, just like you guys are saying, who, I don't know, vastly different people, like professionals in, white collar jobs, professionals in blue collar jobs, everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say one of the most fun and sometimes difficult parts of the hunt for food or coordinating these programs is the mentor-hunter matchmaking, time where, you get these people and you want them to have a good experience. And so, but the people who are the mentors and volunteering for this, they have so much knowledge and experience, but obviously all very different. And so it's a lot of fun to take a look at the participants and take a look at who you've got as mentors and say like, all right, who's going to have fun together?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I work with a few people on this, but some of the instructors and the coordinators know certain mentors better than others. And there have been times where there's like this grizzly old guy, and I remember one of the wildlife biologists at the DNR, she was like, well, this guy is really grouchy and just kind of like rough around the edges. But one time he went out with this really bubbly, like chatty girl, and they had a blast. So let's pair him up with her. And again, just great experience. So sometimes it's a shot in the dark, and sometimes, right away who's going to get along well.
Yeah.
But just like Micah said, developing your network and going with lots of different people, it helps you develop your identity as a hunter. You pick up new things no matter who you're talking to. So it's, having that network is one of the most important things that people can grab if they're trying to figure out how to hunt, because just like you guys said, there's decades or sometimes centuries of knowledge among certain people, and you can't learn that from books or whatever.
R3 reminds me of 50% conservation understanding, 50% social sciences.
Oh, yeah.
Matchmaking. Which is really interesting. That's an interesting dynamic to think about.
Definitely. I'm kind of an introvert and not always a people person, so it's fun. Just it's definitely stretched me and put me outside of my box, which has been really helpful. So it's good to make new friends.
Well, I imagine you could go into a Learn to Hunt program, like let's say it's the Learn to Hunt Deer program, but along your path on that hunt, you're with somebody that, is probably an adept woodsman or so you're going to learn probably so many things beyond just deer hunting. You might flush a wood duck and find out that, oh, well, he's here because he's doing this and there's acorns over here and it's this time of year. So I think, that's important to remember that, you're going to get a lot more out of it than, maybe even what you think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And one of the other cool things about it, too, is from the very beginning, I remember they said this in the class, and I thought it was kind of strange at first, but they said, if we get out there and we're sitting in the blind together and that deer walks out and you get it in your sights and you can't pull the trigger, that's okay. And like they make it very clear to you that, that you don't have to kill something. You're not like being graded or judged.
Right.
And one of the mentors actually said one of the best times he's ever had taking somebody out, they went out and a deer came by pretty early on. The person had it in the crosshairs, couldn't pull the trigger, decided not to, and they just sat there talking the rest of the time. He had the best time just doing that.
That's so cool.
I would have told that person they ruined everything.
And Mark is the
that's
guy
why
that
you're
Jimmy
not a
described.
Anyway, I'd like to sign up to mentor next week.
You were my mentor, along with Ryan Muckenhern.
I reckon so.
Both of you guys.
That was a great trip.
Being
Still
with
one of my
what-
most still
I was just gonna
With,
say.
one of my most favorite
with
trips.
with what you just
Hey.
said, clearly I was relying primarily on Ryan Muck and Ernest.
As you should. I think I gave you that advice early on.
Yeah, and you were
Kill
just
it or you hate yourself forever, Jimmy.
telling me to just shove off, but
No.
Micah, you got 2 little kiddos, right?
Yep.
And what are your thoughts now after having done the Learn to Hunt programs that you've done? How do you suppose you're going to introduce them to now your...
So my oldest boy, I'm very lucky to have some private land that I can hunt on. So I have a lot of more opportunity to kind of do this type of thing. But the last time I got, this was actually a couple of years ago, I got the biggest deer I've ever shot. It was just huge. And we had to drive a truck out there and use rope to pull it into the back of the truck and all that. But when my father-in-law went back to get the truck, he also brought my son out, who's at the time was 3, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And, we let him walk up to the deer and kind of take a look. And it started a conversation that still goes on. Like when we eat meat now, he asked me what the meat is.
That's so cool.
And
Cool.
it's just, it's healthy and it's good. And it's let me talk to him about kind of where meat comes from and also death, which is kind of a much deeper thing. He asked me if it hurt the animal, and we have those kind of talks, And so it's been really good, and he is jacked to go squirrel hunting. He really wants to go. That's my kind of my favorite way to hunt right now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's great. It's let me have talks with my kids that my son, my oldest, that I wouldn't have had otherwise, and it's kind of introduced him to something I think is really important and something he'll kind of be into the rest of his life. I'm definitely going to get them into hunting, and start him off with squirrels.
Yeah.
Smaller game.
I think and you kind of touched on this earlier, like Micah is the person that we need to get, and I think you implied this or even probably said it, but like now you've got an adult hooked who can now take his kids hunting and introduce them. So you built another mentor that, anyway, I think these adult hunters that maybe haven't had the access or the opportunity that's, and I think you already implied that that's the
For
future.
sure. I think it's also important. So, talking about this, this group of adults who are, from the Madison community, and they're studying these certain majors and things like that. I think that's what we found has worked for us. That's like making some kind of difference. But, for other people, there's kind of this prescription. Like, you don't have to. We would love for you to mentor. That would be great. Call me. But if you have friends or families or nieces or nephews or one of my hunting mentors, he has a practice grandson and granddaughter. But if there's people in your community who you enjoy spending time with that don't hunt, like that can be an easy inroad too. Like, you don't have to go with somebody that you've never met before, who you don't have a lot in common with. And I think that it can be an important way to share your passion and just, being able to have that experience. Even if it's a bad experience, the bad experiences hunting always make the best stories.
Well, and important too is I remember the first time that I carried a rifle on the public land, I felt like a criminal.
Yeah.
It's because I'd never hunted in my life before.
Yep.
And like when we talk about mentorship, it's not just about, we already touched on this a little bit, but it's not just about harvesting an animal. Like you know, it's okay. Like you're hunting, it's legal for you to hunt here. Like you can do this. You can carry the gun onto the land. And that was like one of the hardest things for me to get over was like walking by someone who's out hiking, being like, "Hey."
Yeah. I did that this last fall. I was walking out after a very unsuccessful trudge around. That's all it was, with a gun
And waiters.
and chest waders. I went a very far distance in chest waders. I was also hunting with a 308 AK-47 basically platform. So I essentially looked like I don't know, probably like
I would have run.
probably like one of those like quintessential Russian James Bond bad guys, but in chest waders and an orange vest. And I walked by a dude out walking his husky, and he was like, "Hey, what's up? You get anything?" And I was like, "Nope." But that was that. I remember as I saw him walking up, I was like, "Great, this guy's gonna head for the hills."
Yeah.
But, nope, just walked right by. He's like, "Hey, how's it going?" Casual interaction.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know. Like, I've been in similar where you're kind of fearful, and then generally I'd say that is what happens. You're like, oh, that was awesome.
Well, I'll tell you
know?
what, I've never met anybody like Mark, where the guy goes out hunting during whatever season he's in, and somehow the next Monday we come in and ask him how he did, and he's like, well, I met this one guy. We wound up hunting together for
used his dog.
Yeah, he had a dog, so
Mark
we used
hunts
that,
over dogs and
hung
doesn't
out.
own one.
Yeah, learned his wife and his kid's name. We decided, this Friday we're gonna have a grill out, and everything. I mean, it's like
And let me show you my banded goose.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's right. Don't forget that. But anyway, yeah, I don't know how Mark's just a social butterfly.
Well,
Even
the
when
other
he's-
thing-
even
I
when
think,
he's out
you know,
hunting.
it's because when you meet somebody hunting, you're instantly on common ground.
Well, I gotta say though, because
that's very
if anybody came up to me and they were like, hey, how's it going? We're both out hunting. Hey, can I use your dog? Want to hang out sometime? How about this Friday? I'd be like, get away from me.
I think you're embellishing how these interactions go, by the way. But
I don't know.
I did have a question for Micah. When you've done, sorry, I'm switching gears again, but I just
Switch
want
away.
to.
Switching
Sometimes I
to
want
on track.
Clutch.
Well, I want
Gas
to
off, clutch in, switch gears, dump the clutch.
nailed it.
Go.
When you've participated in these Learn to Hunt programs, did you have kids?
Yeah, I had one at the time of deer, and I think I had my second by the time of learn to hunt with ducks. It's a blur.
So, and I guess my question is because I've got 2 kids as well, and I know time is like you just don't have a ton of time. So,
Right.
how did you manage that?
Yeah, that's one of the best parts about it too. Is they make it very convenient, especially like with the programs where there's more of the Learn to Hunt Deer. I think was maybe a little easier for me. Otherwise, it's like, with duck, it's like, here's this one class, it's coming up, make time if you can. There's not like a ton of options around it. But it's not like the classes take forever. And there's generally choices. So you can say, I think it's, you can hunt today, this day, or that. And like with turkey, for example, I think it was if you made it out early, you could have hunted a Friday, you could have hunted a Saturday, and if your mentor was willing, you could go out on a Sunday. So you can fit things in. But they go out of their way, and your mentor will go out of their way too. I shouldn't guarantee that, but in my experience, the mentors have gone out of their way to make things kind of fit my
I think,
time.
yeah, the people who volunteer and work on these programs they're super passionate about it. They wouldn't be spending the time if they did. And, for us, it's so important to get people the experience. That's what it's all about. And so for our turkey program, we extend our license waiver all the way to up until the turkey season's open. And we try to have these programs before the actual hunting season's open so people can learn how to buy a license, say at least get a gun in their hands, go out and get, the baseline feel for it. And a lot of the times, for turkey hunting especially, people just want to go over and over and over again. And there's opportunity to do that. And, the people from these programs have been amazing. There's been some from the last few years who took the program, never shot a rifle before, never killed a deer. They shot a deer during the program. They bought their own license. They checked out a gun. We have a firearm loaner program at the DNR. And they went out on public land and killed a deer and hauled it out and either took it to a processor or they butchered it themselves, maybe with the help of a mentor. But you can do it.
Yeah.
It's and I think that the people who take the programs are very motivated. It's a very high class of people.
Very
cool.
What are you guys seeing as far as people who continue on? Let's say a person does learn to hunt deer and then or learn to hunt for food, buying licenses and kind of continuing along that path on their own. Is that?
Yeah, that's a question lies near and dear to my heart because I did my master's degree looking at that question. So I've done a lot of research on, the hunter adoption model and the outdoor recreation adoption model. So basically, we're trying to figure out, what are the stages that people have to go through to become an avid, not necessarily independent, but how are we going to get them to buy licenses over and over and over again? And one of the tricky things about measuring that is that hunters, take your average hunter, they might not buy a license every year. They might go a year and just say oh, my friends are out of town or, I broke my leg or whatever. And so it's not, they just don't go. But, if their brother from out of state comes back in and they want to go hunting, that's when they're going to do it again. And so what we used was this survival model. So we did kind of the same thing. It's mark recapture model. So the same things when you band a duck, the hunter shoots it, they call the number in, and people can use statistics to figure out, like, all right, what does the population look like, and are these certain animals surviving, and what does that mean? So what I got to do, since everybody who buys a license gets their very own customer ID number at the DNR, it sticks with you for life, so we can look at all the different licenses that you have purchased throughout your hunting career, so to speak. But so the first time you take a program, either Learn to Hunt or Hunt for Food, you also get a DNR customer ID number that's required, so we can track you. And we're not very big brother about it or anything like that, but it's the same thing when you buy a license. So we have just decades of data. So the DNR has an electronic licensing system, and it's huge. So we can go back and look at a certain person and say, all right, you bought a conservation patrons license in 2011, or next year you bought only a gun deer license, or, we can look at all that information. We can look at your demographic information. You always put in your birth date, things like that. So I literally ran mark recapture models on people. So that was fun. And what we found was that the Hunt for Food program is a lot more effective at retaining hunters than the Learn to Hunt program. Probably for the reasons I mentioned, that the Learn to Hunt program has been branded mainly for kids, and it's a great program. But just taking a kid who has never hunted before, it's a lot more work, and they're not as likely to develop that network. So my hypothesis is, I couldn't quite prove this, but is that the more you can interact with hunters and become, have a relationship with somebody who can keep going with you, the more likely you are to keep hunting. So what we tried to do in the Hunt for Food programs is make connections and develop relationships and help people feel comfortable enough where they can come back next year, call us, call their mentor, call somebody we recommend, and feel comfortable going again. So what was interesting and not surprising, I guess, but we also had a control group of people who didn't take either Learn to Hunt or Hunt for Food, and those people had the highest survival rates. So if you come from probably a hunting family, you're most likely to hunt.
Okay.
I'm curious, and this might be a topic. I mean, this probably is a topic for another podcast down the road. But we talked about like the Learn to Hunt and Hunt for Food, and that obviously applies to hunting and fishing. Now, there's the other side of the coin here, and this is where it's definitely probably something for a future podcast. But for the shooting sports, I know just in passing, talking on our way in here, you mentioned that you've been doing a lot of stuff at like public shooting ranges and stuff like that, and that's a huge funding source for all this stuff. So like what, just give me the high level, and then probably this will be something that we get on the books later at a later date, but what are some of the things that are going on that side of things right now?
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons that hunting has become so interesting to me, is that there's so much history to it, and it's so the conservation side of things is so interconnected with hunters, anglers, and the shooting sports. And so the shooting sports are very popular right now. It was really interesting. So when Obama was president, gun sales spiked because people were afraid that their guns were being taken away, and it's leveled off now, I think, because there's less fear maybe. But sale of firearms and ammunition, which includes not only hunting firearms but also pistols and sporting guns and things like that, and all of the ammunition that goes into that. So it gets put into this big federal pot. Well, sorry, I should start over. So whenever you buy a firearm or ammunition, there's an 11% excise tax on it, and that 11% of the purchase price that's just built in goes to this big federal pot. And every year it accrues billions of dollars, and every year the federal government reallocates all of that money back to the 50 states earmarked for conservation programs, and that's important. That it's earmarked for conservation because, there's a lot of different things you can do with budgets and pull money from different things. And that is just legally not allowed for this money. So whenever you buy a firearm, you're contributing to conservation. And the way it's reallocated is that it's the amount of money that each state gets is based on the size of the state. So bigger states get more money than smaller states, but also the number of licensed hunters. So the more hunters you have, the more money you get. So that's the other side of the coin, where it's really important to buy a hunting license in addition to that. Yeah, it's great that shooting has been so popular lately. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like in the next few years. I think it's just very driven by kind of what's happening politically in society every year. But it's interesting to me because, I came from a culture that, guns are scary, and that was one of the biggest barriers for me, was feeling comfortable with firearms, and now I love them, which is great. But so what I was talking with Eric about earlier was the new Columbia County shooting range, and it's the first publicly owned and open to the public shooting range that's opened in over 20 years. So,
nice.
We just had, extra, more funding than usual that we were able to do that. And then additionally, in Columbia County, people were, finding areas on public lands to shoot, and it's legal to do that in Columbia County. But it just wasn't very safe where they were doing it. They were bringing like appliances and tires and all these things, and there's like a subdivision like
hey,
over
bring
the
your
berm.
refrigerator. We'll float it full of tannerite.
Exactly. So they decided, like, all right, we've got the money, we've got the need. This is like a politically neutral kind of thing, and so let's build a shooting range. And it just opened last July. It's been really popular, and it's kind of interesting talking with folks. A lot of the people who are shooting there, they may not hunt, but they're still interested in contributing for sure.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you guys don't have to clean up Eric's refrigerator.
That would be terrible.
God darn it, that guy.
Yeah.
I don't know where he gets all these
Getting all these
fridges.
shots thrown out, man.
The last big question I had on my mind was, I think way back towards the beginning, before we, as we were so excited and things were just going all over the place, you mentioned some of the ramifications that could happen of a declining hunter population, and say this trend continues, which a lot of the folks out there say it will, and just it keeps going down. What are some of these ramifications that could happen, like the really potentially negative things?
I think there's different angles you can look at that from, and so we were just talking about how hunting and the shooting sports literally contribute directly to the state conservation programs, especially. So the legislative act that functions through is called the Pittman-Robertson Act, or the Federal Aid and Wildlife Restoration Act, and that's been in place since 1933. So we've had over 80 years of that, and since that money goes directly to state agencies to, for the purpose of wildlife restoration, that's where a lot of agency money comes from, like the staff time, it's
jobs.
Yep,
job
exactly. Like direct program funding for purchasing lands, doing the habitat management, doing research on wildlife populations. That all stems from Pittman-Robertson.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that, there's not other sources of funding for that kind of work. There's a lot, but from the state agency level, which manages all the public lands in the state, wildlife is in the public trust. Nobody owns it. Everybody owns it. And the state is the organization that manages those, some like resources. They're not even resources, but they're more than that for everybody. And, it kind of sucks to talk about money all the time, but that's where it comes from, and that's what enables people to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you go to a piece of public land, and whether you're there to walk in with your dog, just on a hike, or if you're going hunting and you see a mowed trail, that's not an accident. That is there for a reason, and your funding that you contributed is why that is there. Now, without that public land is going to be an overgrown mess. The wildlife management that's on the backside of that diminishes, and now where do we sit?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the dark side of the coin.
Right. I know there's also discussion too, getting outside of even a little bit of the money aspect, and some of this comes up as well when people discuss certain hunts being taken away. Like, for example, we were talking with those guys about the black bear hunt in New Jersey.
Oh, yep. Mm-hmm.
but a decreasing amount of hunters means a decreasing amount of, I guess, a potentially decreasing amount of animal, what's the word? Like your population's getting kind of screwed up, right? Because those tags
Yeah.
get put out there for a reason. It's not just because like, oh, hey, I guess we'll give you guys some tags. You can go have fun and, shoot something.
Oh, just
It's-
implementing it as like an effective management tool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, hunters. So, from an ecological perspective, and my supervisor may not like me for saying this, but, the deer population, especially a lot of conservationists and ecologists, the deer population is too high and they're completely decimating native plant communities. And, without natural predators who are able to control those populations right now, hunters are really the only effective force that can make an impact. So it's, the reason I love this, I keep saying this, but there's so many angles to look at this from. And Wisconsin is so interesting because it's got such a culture and people are so passionate about deer. And, sometimes it can be frustrating trying to make decisions, but it's also just, I love the passion people bring to the table on a lot of these issues.
Yeah.
Regardless of what side they're on.
yeah.
Because you got to respect the passion.
Totally. And it's kind of the same thing, Canada geese. And, the interesting part is that, wildlife restoration brought a lot of these species to the levels that they're at right now. I mean, deer and Canada geese. I remember my dad, he's a baby boomer. He told me that he didn't see a deer in his life until he was in college, over age 20.
Yeah.
And, that's in the 70s even.
Yeah,
you-
and now
you-
it's hard to drive around without hitting one.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you talk to guys that are that once lived or in areas that are now essentially covered up in deer.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you the story when they saw the first deer track on their property.
Yeah.
And
That-
it was like a cause for celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably where some of those urban legends about, the hodag and the chupacabra came up. It's like,
I
what are
think-
these tracks?
We've seen this before.
Yeah.
But another angle is the human wildlife conflict side of things. You mentioned it's hard to drive around without hitting a deer. I mean, that it has implications. But,
Yep.
Another one that I think is interesting is just the public support for hunting. If hunting declines, there's fewer people to, talk about it and give it good public representation. And, it's interesting coming from a non-hunting culture again and having been adopted into this culture, and I do it and I'm avid and I enjoy it. My opinion has changed completely, and I think that, based on some of the concern about firearms around the country, I kept asking why aren't guns banned? Why do we sell guns? And I just think it's really important for hunters to talk about how they use them and how safe they are if they're used correctly. And
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Got to come out of the bunker and engage
Yeah.
people. You can't just call people idiots. I
mm-hmm.
don't know. I have friends who think, or friends of friends who think it's kind of crazy to go out squirrel hunting and all this kind of just to have guns out in age. Isn't that dangerous? And when you actually talk about how fun it is to hunt, how important it is, and how what really matters to it, the harvesting of game, and actually share meat with them too, which is awesome.
Yep. a big deal.
It can change minds so quickly rather
Yep.
than just thinking people are idiots and not talking to them and that kind of thing. There's no time for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of hunters about this issue, and especially from hunting conservation organizations like NWTF, National Wild Turkey Federation, and Pheasants Forever, and there's a number of them, and some of them, we've been trying to reach and saying how can you bring in more young people? Does this issue? Are you aware of this issue of declining hunters? Does it matter to you? What are you going to do about it? Because you're the only ones who can pass on this knowledge. And a lot of them are aware. They're afraid of what that means for hunting in the future. But they just, for some reason, don't feel like they can do anything about it, or, welcoming a young person into their organization is too hard. And, looking at that, what's going to happen after you're gone? Is your chapter just not going to be there anymore?
Right.
And they say, well, yeah. And that's always so sad.
Yeah.
These organizations are huge parts of the conservation story, and it would be just devastating not to have them anymore. But, you know, on the flip side of that, you know, to me, hunting is a part of how I express my land ethic, or it's how I connect with land and be a participant in the ecosystem. And that's a little hippie-ish, I guess, but
Hippie.
I think that...
I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks. But I think that would be a real loss to society.
Totally.
That we've said before that when you're out hunting, you see things and you experience things that you would never do while you're hiking or boating or whatever. And I really do think that people are becoming more disconnected from nature
Wildlife.
and wildlife. And I think that doesn't bode well.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Great stuff.
I like it.
I like where we're at too, because MC Ryan's got the. Oh, you know what I just realized?
It gets redder.
It gets more red.
I noticed that.
The
Yeah.
further we go beyond an hour.
Yep.
Well done over there, MC Ryan. That is a great
I wonder what
trick.
happens if we hit 2 hours, if that screen just
Full
like
red.
Just melts.
full red.
blows up, falls off the wall.
Our mics just shut off.
Yeah.
I've got 2 questions.
I was gonna say, Mark, I'm
just-
fully expect you to close us out with a number of different things, all in rapid succession. So please do
Fire
your
away.
thing.
Okay, 2 questions. And I don't...
Which means 4.
Yep, and then 7 or 8 last calls.
Got 30 seconds.
Yep.
God, you guys know me. Other states. So I know you work on Wisconsin, with Wisconsin, but do other states have similar programs that people have access to?
Yeah, it's definitely growing. So Wisconsin, at least we like to think of ourselves as, you know, the cutting edge of R3 efforts, and I think that's because, this paper and this trend was kind of identified here. But other states definitely are following along. There's R3 coordinators in over 30 other states, and that number is growing a lot. There's a lot of new national organizations like the Council to Advance Hunting and the Shooting Sports. And I think just different agencies and organizations, on the hunting side and non-hunting side of conservation are starting to really say, like, okay, this is happening. This is an issue. What are we going to do about it? You know, if hunters are going to continue to decline, something's still got to happen. So
Right.
whether or not it's reversing that trend or slowing it down, people are recognizing it.
Okay, cool. Question 2. If a person is so inspired to become a mentor, and I guess maybe you can speak probably specifically to Wisconsin on this one, not other states, but how do they do that?
So you can contact me directly. Can you put my contact information on the podcast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you can contact me directly or any one of our R3 team. You can look us up online. I imagine you could contact anybody on the Vortex team as well.
We'll just shuffle them to you.
Sounds good. But, I mean, even on your own, like I mentioned before, if you have a kid or a friend, or I've heard of people even taking their doctors and asking them, hey, you want to go pheasant hunting?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're totally into it. Just offer. Because the highest success rates that people have, showing people how to hunt and creating a new hunter is just asking them. You never know what you're going to get. And let's see, what else? Or even, there's apps that you can download. Powder Hook is the main one I'm thinking of, that are designed specifically for people to be able to answer questions just digitally. There's hardly any time commitment. You don't have to meet anybody anywhere if you don't want to. But people always have questions, and if you have the expertise, you can answer. I'm trying to think
I don't
of
know
other ways,
if I would
but-
highly recommend utilizing a ton of the folks around here, at least the ones that I've utilized. Nothing against you guys, Eric and Mark in this room, but I gotta say, every time we've gone out, it has been a disaster, and I absolutely.
It's not about the
I
end result.
absolutely-
I would like to point that out.
But here's the funny thing. So I shouldn't say that I don't recommend him. I recommend pretty much anybody who's willing to go out with you, and I just have to give you guys some crap.
It worked.
Even though, truthfully, every time we've gone out has been an utter train wreck, aside from the Nebraska trip, which went excellently. The train wrecks have made me even more interested and more excited.
Totally.
And I love them the most. I actually tell... I almost never tell the story about when we shot that deer. I tell all the stories about all the train wrecks that we've had.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I
Those
was
are the ones.
So
going to
yeah.
say too, is you don't have to be an expert to be a mentor at
Oh,
all.
yeah.
Like, you don't have to make something happen every time.
We're living proof.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Man, we have
I
a lot of fun.
One of my favorite stories, my coworker John, he offered to take us duck hunting on the Mississippi. And long story short, his waders leaked, the fuel line on the boat broke, and we paddled out to the island, which was already occupied by somebody else. We had to go farther away to a less ideal spot, and overall, one teal was shot. It was still fun.
Hey, at least you didn't end
The
up.
stove blew up.
Oh,
Yes.
at least you,
we're not
didn't
blowing
end
any-
up in the Gulf of Mexico.
This is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Eric, we're normal.
Although that
Yeah.
would have been an even better story.
Yeah.
But it's so much better than, oh, yeah, we went out, we pounded a limit.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, not that that's not fun. And that's, I'd like to
Yep.
go do that.
Yeah.
Every time we go anywhere, Eric always tells us we're gonna just
Just hammer 'em.
Hey,
Mop
expect the best, but deal with the worst. That's my mantra.
heard the opposite so many times. So I guess I don't know. Maybe you know something I don't, and those other people don't, and pretty much everybody else doesn't. But
Everyone else is wrong. I mean, clearly.
That's my motto.
yeah,
Jim, last calls?
I'd say I think we pretty much nailed it.
Okay.
Plus that screen just keeps getting redder and redder.
It's giving me anxiety.
Big thanks to our new guests to the podcast. Micah, we were discussing, thought it was a little bit interesting. It must be a little interesting for you coming from being copywriter. So we actually made him talk rather than just write down all of his thoughts.
Yes.
So that's pretty huge.
Yeah, that was fun.
Maybe you'll do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. With that said, Mark, you do it. You do the close.
Man, thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you do hunt, take somebody hunting. I'm talking to myself as well on this one. And let's turn this trend around.
I like it.
Okay.
All right. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us on the show.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. I like it.
That was fun.
I think we got to get you and Chief on for talking about the shooting sports and stuff.
I would
think
love
that'd be
that.
really
Yeah.
cool.
That'd be great.
I think
We've had that suggestion actually a couple
Yeah.
times too.
Yep.
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I love that part of it. Just like how infiltrated it is into conservation society.
And it's such an
and-
overlooked part too.
Yeah, I
didn't even know that
know.
when you buy guns and all that. It's
Yeah.
just,
I know.
Hunters. Hunters should like shooters, and shooters should like hunters.
I was gonna say like that when we went out to the Wanakee to do the the skeet shoot or whatever for as part of the Learn to Hunt with
Mhm.
dogs. That was amazing. Like we got to shoot skeet out there with those guys. who
That's a
were,
super cool facility
I
too.
love that. Club,
like hardcore guys, and like they have. You know, for me, I walk in there and there's all these political stickers on the refrigerator immediately when you walk in the door, and I was kind of like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
And then like you actually get to talk to these guys, and they take you out.
They're
There's-
super sweet.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like
Like,
the
they're
nicest
just teddy
guys.
bears.
in the
Yeah,
world.
yep.
I had one guy who was like giddy for me. He's like, yes, yes,
Yeah.
do that again.
Yeah.
That's how you did that one.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Just
He
how
was so
willing
fired up about it. It was
people
great.
are to help.
Mhm.
And I think, I was afraid to let people help when I first started, and it was nice when people kept coming back and saying like, let me help you still. And everybody just had such a good attitude about it, and they helped me come out of my shell a lot of times. So
Yeah,
That's awesome.
that's super cool.
Like, why do you think, you didn't want the
I
help?
think I was suspicious of hunters, honestly.
Yeah. What's their
was just-
agenda?
Yeah, and being a woman especially, everybody thinks I always need help and things like that, but I do need help, and I just had all these preconceived notions, if Jake would go to Camporama, which is their archery deer camp or whatever, and I wasn't invited, or if they invited me, I was like, oh, they don't really want me to come because I
Yeah.
don't really know how to hunt, and I'm a girl, and I'm gonna mess up their good time, and that was wrong.
Yeah.
So
What
Yeah.
shocked me about the Learn to Hunt Deer class was over half of the people were women, and over half of them, I would say, were under the age of 35.
yeah.
Just young,
That's
really
awesome.
cool.
full of young women.
Mhm.
And they ended up, kind of like you, I was a little bit worried. I was like, you're going to send them out there with those guys?
Yeah.
Those guys ended up being these awesome, great guys. Very cool.
Mhm.
Well, I've thought about that even, like, people are like, oh, take a kid hunting. Like I said before, I think it's actually more important to take people like you and you hunting if we really want to turn it around. But, like, there's that, too. It's like, oh, let me take your child into the woods, like, alone.
With a gun.
Like, I would never do that. I'd be like, hey, we can do this, and actually, I've thought about this even though I haven't done it yet. It's like, yeah, I'll take your kid hunting, but you're coming too because you're their driver. So, you need to learn this stuff.
I'm not going to lift them over a fence and touch their in any way.
Yeah.
Or just, I mean.
That's one of the things that's really huge with squirrel hunting in so many places is you learn woodscraft, like how to take a gun over a fence, all these sorts of things, and just handling a gun in the woods. And I didn't, again, when I first carried a gun out in the public land, it was like sneaking. No one would see me.
Oh, yeah.
But it teaches you all that stuff, like how to move quietly and all that.
Yeah.
And that's like the way I want my kids to start is because it's such a great foundation to build on. But I agree with you. It's like I'm not going to take if my kid has a friend. It's like hell no. I don't want to get in trouble for taking a kid out.
I grew up like right across the street from like 4,000 acres of public land, and it's right on a 4-way intersection. And I remember like because I would just walk over there like, and that's where I did all my like rabbit and squirrel hunting, and I would wait there and I'd be like looking like, are there any cars coming? And then I would just sprint across the road with my shotgun because I didn't want anyone to see me because I felt like a weirdo,
Yeah.
And then now like it's just funny to think back on that, like literally I can remember times where I'd be sitting in the bushes like cars coming by. Talk about suspicious. Who's the guy crouched in the bushes with a 12 gauge? Like, are you kidding me? I can't believe I didn't get the cops called on me.
Just gotta act like
At hiding.
you gotta act like you're supposed to be there.
Yeah.
It's all about that.
Hey, how you doing?
I was going to ask, and I didn't ask. So you say, like, kind of like the female demographic is the one that's on the rise. Are you guys attributing that to, like, any kind of like major specific factor, or I guess why is that the one that's moving?
I looked into that. That was kind of like my pet research project while I was in grad school, and I didn't get to write it up or anything yet. I'm hoping still I can publish it at some point. But I think it's just, honestly, this is going to be hippie me coming out again, but like feminism has come so far in the last few decades. Like in the 60s was when birth control came out. And so that was like my mom's generation, and it's so commonplace now that people don't really think about like those kinds of things. But I think like just general public acceptance of women getting into these traditionally male-dominated careers and recreations and like one of the things that really was like wow to me was I looked up like girls' participation in varsity athletics in high school and college.
Yeah.
And in the 70s, it was like 12% girls, the rest boys. But by 2011, girls had increased 40%. And it was because basically that Title IX was passed.
Yeah.
So you can't discriminate based on gender in any kind of educational institution. So I really think that like structural fixes like that can have a huge impact on who participates in things. And I think hunting might have been like a sideline off of that, actually. So.
This kind of popped into my head just now as we talked about it, but I wonder if it's even like when you look at like a hunting family, I wonder if it's even like, like dads, or I guess I'm gonna make a generalization here, but the dad who might have previously only taken his son hunting, maybe he's like, oh no, I'll take my daughter hunting too, or if I only have a daughter, I'll take my daughter hunting, like where maybe it didn't even maybe occur to them before, perhaps. I mean, it's like total speculation made up, like it just popped in my head.
No, that's totally true. I did interviews with women who are like avid license buyers and was just asking them, how did you become an avid license buyer? Because you're bucking the trend. And a lot of the people who didn't buy licenses anymore, or who started buying licenses as adults, they said like, well, my dad just never took me, or a lot of them just didn't really have interest in hunting until they reached adulthood too. So I think that just girls and boys tend to be interested in different things when they're young sometimes, but I think that is changing, that dads are at least asking, do you want to go?
It's cool.
I had a proud dad moment the other day. We were at the park, the play park, and a group of geese were flying over, and both my daughters are going, "Daddy!" I mean, they're losing their minds. "Daddy, geese, geese, geese!" And there's other families there, and they go, "Shoot them! Shoot them!" And Crystal's like, "You're loving this, aren't you?"
Yeah.
Tear.
Yeah.
Everybody else.
My girls.
They're precious. They're flowers.
Couple other dads at the park are like, you see what they're doing?
Yeah.
Do that.
Oh man, that's
Good
glorious.
stuff.
Cool. I love this one. This
Yes.
is fun.
Thanks for having
Thank you for
us.
joining us.
All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks everybody for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Again, everybody, thanks and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.